there is so much data out there now where you can actually find your fan, and you can find fans like them, and you can market to them, and you can get them to come in the doors, and you can get them to come in more often. And, we used to always say, if you could just get them in one more time a year, think of what that would be. It's an interesting, the values of everything that we looked at for years have completely turned upside down compared.
One thing though, it's loyalty plays a critical role with your current guests.
Right.
But guest acquisition, still new guest acquisition, you still have to be relentless about it because your current loyal guests, they're fragile. First of all, eventually,
and they're
not to be morbid, but they will die.
And they get disloyal. They do.
Well,
they have a lot of options.
Because even with some of your best guests, you can lose them for outside of dying,
right?
For reasons that are totally out of your control.
Right.
I used an example within Firehouse years ago to illustrate this for my franchise community. This was to try to ward off complacency. Complacency is one of the most dangerous things for a business or at any level. It's particularly in a system where your franchisees become complacent. They're doing well enough. They maybe don't have the same drive that you do for growth and so on. So what I would remind them in terms of the fragility of the business, I've used a personal example. There was I will leave it as an unnamed coffee brand that I was very loyal to. It was on my way to my old office at Firehouse. I would go there every morning, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends. It was convenient on the way. There's many more of them in the chain.
Right.
And then we decided to move our office. This is 6 years ago. We moved to over on Old St. Augustine Road. And that coffee shop was no longer on my route. Now, they knew me by name. I even got I could go on. I could give you a whole deeper story on how my loyalty got generated from my first time that I went there. But all of a sudden, they weren't on my path to the office. Was it a super distance out of the way? No, I could have taken a little bit different route and would have added maybe a mile and a half or two to my trip. But that wasn't wired. I would dare say maybe I wasn't that loyal, but I would say I was pretty loyal by most standards in terms of frequency and everything else. And just that one life change for me took that location out of my consideration set.
Right.
And at the time, that particular brand had no other shops between me and the office.
So it wasn't going to happen.
And I totally changed my behavior when it came to coffee consumption. I started having it at the office.
Yeah.
When I got in.
And you weren't purchasing. You were just getting it out of your own machine.
Right. So again, if I'm speaking to a franchisee, it's like don't get complacent. You will lose customers.
Everyone loses.
So you better have a ongoing strategy for how you're going to acquire. Getting them into loyalty programs is fantastic. Loyalty these days is...
Well, I think the word loyalty, when I'm talking about it, is less about a loyalty app. It's more about a person being committed to your brand.
Well, sure, yes.
So when I say that, you're going to lose people. They're gonna be loyal for 3 years, and then suddenly they're not anymore. Maybe they had one or two bad experiences, and then they're not coming back. So acquiring new guests all the time, and then leaning into them to build that loyalty, so that they will come in. They'll be the higher frequency. Because I think that's the part that's so hard is, and they're more forgiving. If somebody really, like I'm sure you were very forgiving to your coffee place until it wasn't convenient. And trade areas change, staffing sometimes changes, and you kind of have to, know that whatever happens is going to affect your guests.
Because I would say sometimes the loyalty from the consumer is, I won't say equal parts, but it's towards the people of the business, not just the brand. I mean, you can be brand loyal, maybe especially in retail goods. You might be loyal to an Adidas or a car brand or
Right.
something else. It's not anything about any people
Right.
per se, but it's something about
It's
the
about
brand
the image.
and that product, the image. And restaurants can be quite a bit different, because of the interaction, even though that's changing these days because you have less interaction in many respects, and we could get into a long conversation about whether that's good or bad for the business. But that personal factor, I think, is big. I used to try to inspire our franchisees, our team members, our managers, in one simple way. First of all, we'd start with the premise that, all right, you've got a by the book experience that you expect to be delivered to a guest when they come in. What's in your manuals, check it off. I've done everything. Just because you've done that and made the quote unquote perfect experience, because you did everything by the book, doesn't necessarily make it a really great experience. So my challenge to the team was always, for every guest that comes in, be inspired to try to do one thing for every guest that's not in the book. Don't break rules. Don't think, in a franchise
Right, I know
system.
what you mean.
But find one way to make it different and unique for that person that lets them know they're a little bit special. That
I love that.
and if you do that, if you are able to actually pull that off, oh, your sales and the true loyalty that you got from guests would be through the roof. In some respects, some of the loyalty programs, the technical loyalty programs that are out there, they're great. They're very effective. We can measure all the results.
Right.
But they can also make you lazy
Yes.
when it comes to loyalty. You forget
Exactly.
about the real things that happen. But at the same time, still, even I can't emphasize enough how still fragile it can be. See, here's what I think loyalty gets you. Not technical loyalty programs, but loyalty with
Commitment to
an
the brand.
operator. It gets you one or two passes.
Yeah, it does.
But that's about it.
Right.
Because let's say I've got a favorite little casual Italian restaurant that my wife and I go to all the time. And the people, I see some turnover like any business does, even though it's like a family-owned place, but they recognize me when we come in. It's like your place. You'll love it.
You feel comfortable.
But if you go in and you have a really bad experience for some reason, right? And you're like shaking your head like, oh my gosh, this was so out of character, and whether it was the food was bad or the server was rude or whatever it was, but it was bad, and you walk out saying, oh gosh darn it, it's disappointing because it's never been like that, and we love this place, and so are you going to not come back because of one bad experience? No, you probably earned your pass.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, I can guarantee you that I may have had 100 great experiences, and then that one bad one, and the next time I go back for visit number 102, which visit am I thinking about?
Right.
Visit 101.
Right.
All right, the one that was bad. And because I love the place, what am I thinking? I think, I'm hoping, please let this be better. Don't let this one last blemish, this one last visit be indicative of what I can expect going forward.
Right.
So if I go in, I have a great experience, I'm like, phew, oh, terrific.
It's true.
But if they mess it up a second time in a row, and especially if it happened to be on the same type of issue, there's I would say, a better than even chance that now as a consumer you're saying,
going back.
oh, I'm not going to go back.
Put a big space.
I'm going to put a big space between it in terms of the frequency that I go back, and so again, it's very fragile. But that's the nature of the restaurant business, and that's what makes it difficult. You have to be relentless in terms of your day-to-day commitment. In a operation with franchisees, if you got a great franchisee, they've made an investment, they're protecting it. If they've heard me preach enough, hopefully they accept the fact that they personally carry it through into their restaurant. But if they don't have the skill set, the personality, the whatever it takes to impart that same passion and that understanding on their team,
right,
it's not sustainable for them. Because going back to my challenge to touch every guest,
yes,
a franchisee can't touch every guest
right.
in some unique way. They're not try to be a single store operator, be there open to close, and you still might have a challenge trying to get, unless you're going to stand at the door as a greeter and get everybody coming and going every day. So the only way to make that aspiration a reality of, again, touching every guest is, all right, you've got to get your team to buy in. Because I would say that's very doable. If I put in a context of a Firehouse Subs restaurant, and if I've got 14, 15 people on total payroll, still modest size business, on a lunch shift, maybe it's 6, 7, 8 people. And if everybody bought in on it, and I said, hey, look, all right, here's one of our key goals. Just when every time between all of us, somebody's got to make sure each person's got that little extra special touch. Sometimes it's as simple as making sure that we're thanking them on the way out. Within Firehouse, we had a great culture of welcoming everybody. Welcome to Firehouse. When they come in, and said genuinely, it wasn't a shtick or anything else. It was because starting with our founders, the belief was, my gosh, if that guest doesn't come in here, nobody's got a gun to their head to come in. It's a completely voluntary decision. We better be super thankful that they made that decision, or we have no business. If they don't do that.
I think guests do want to feel appreciated. They definitely do.
Sure.
It's interesting that you say all that, because I usually say your loyal guest, the one that comes often, like you came to the little Italian place, they're gonna give you a pass once, maybe twice, but they're not going to give it to you again, and particularly not in the environment today. You're paying more, the experience is costing more, there's a lot of shuffling around anyway with new people coming in and out. It's just not, they want something they can count on. And I think that, we see it with Starbucks. Starbucks has got and sometimes it's very stilted and awkward, but they've got the person at the window always trying to make a conversation with, well, what are you doing today? And I always think, well, I'm actually going to work. But, I do see that. And I think maybe that's part of it, is just see the guest. Maybe you aren't going to be, as, warm and emotional, and not all of them, but just that, like to your point, welcome to Firehouse Subs. That's just immediately you feel like, okay, they're glad I'm here. There are a couple of other brands that do that, and I think that is definitely a feeling of happy, friendly environment. And today there are a lot of restaurants that don't have that environment at all.
I would, at the same time, while we have it in our, it's a procedure, it's a standard to say, make sure to welcome everybody. But as I've always told operators, look, if Jenifer's coming in, it's okay to just say, hey, Jenifer, great to see you today. I'd rather you do that than say, welcome to Firehouse.
Yeah.
So don't.
Or, Jenifer, do you want your hooks and ladder? It's
the more you do that,
the more you can know. I think
the more you personalize it. Yeah. So okay, break that rule. I'm cool with that. If what you did allowed you to identify more with the guest
than normal. Well, talk to me a little bit. One of the things that I loved about Firehouse Subs, I think, is, I think people still see, and it was a way for them to connect to the community. Not only did they, they were started by firemen, they supported, the firefighters of that area. They would often have their, mural on their wall would be specific to that community. They do all kinds of efforts to raise money and do golf tournaments, and I think have a very local presence, which I think is also great. But talk to me a little bit about the importance of that, the charitable efforts that make a brand stand apart, and also a little bit, about your own thoughts of that, because I feel like that's really something that you bring to the table wherever you go.
What Firehouse has done philanthropically ended up being the most important work, the most meaningful part of the experience of leading Firehouse. The Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation in total now has fulfilled over $82 million in grants to provide equipment to first responders and entities that can use that help in the public safety arena. So it's incredible. It's the biggest difference maker. I think for businesses, businesses have a sort of Maslow's hierarchy, the way people do. Now you have to have a profitable business as a foundation. You've got to get through those basic needs to be able to do it. But once you do, it was proven in the case of Firehouse. We never did it for this reason, but it ends up being extraordinarily helpful for the business,
Right.
because the guests see and they reward you with
your
with their
commitment.
business for what you're doing, and especially when it's something that ties back to their direct community,
Right.
especially. So it's an incredible part of our story. It's not just a feeling that we have about it. It was proven in research that was done by Cornell University. They came in in fact, twice did independent studies on our brand related to the relationship between our philanthropy and the business results. And in both cases, the research showed that the strongest correlating factor to higher sales performance was the commitment that the franchisee and the team were demonstrating in their restaurant to the community. We could measure it through the fundraising that was done and equalized for any factors about, well, it's a high volume restaurant, you should be raising more money. So normalizing for all that.
Right.
And that was powerful. And when we saw that relationship proven, we always felt it. We even started a very rudimentary view of the numbers, led us to believe that there's this connection. But when you had an academic institution like Cornell come in, do it independently, remove any doubt or subjectivity about it, that was a powerful message to take the franchisees. We wanted them to be engaged in the work of the foundation simply because it's the great thing to do.
Right.
And that should be motivation enough. I mean, we have stories about people, even related to our team members, that have been saved. The most powerful story once was when two men were in a automobile accident. The Jaws of Life device
Right.
was used to extricate them from the car. It had been donated the day before
Oh my God.
to that fire and rescue
Amazing.
team, and those two men worked at Firehouse Subs.
Oh my Lord, that is amazing.
So they're part of the team that were raising the money that eventually paid for the equipment that saved their lives. So there are hundreds, thousands of great charities, mind you. We were blessed in the case of Firehouse that it was something that, well, twofold. One, that it just had such a natural connection to the brand.
Right.
Because I think
And to the founders.
and to the founders, and because more and more often, I think businesses in general, not just restaurants, but businesses look for a philanthropic relationship because they want to do good, and there is a realization, I think, for most businesses, this is good for business too.
Right.
But finding that cause that has a natural connectivity to the brand or the business is not an easy thing. Even if you look at the start of within the restaurant industry, I always looked at McDonald's and Ronald McDonald House as a great example.
Right.
But that wasn't something that even had some sort of real natural connection at the beginning.
No.
Providing support to families of children, or
They really had to build the
built it.
awareness of that. Yeah.
Right, and it had its own genesis story. I think it was in the Baltimore market with a franchisee, but it grows into this powerful thing. So in the case of Firehouse, we just got this natural connection between firefighters and so on, which makes the task, well, all the easier then of raising the money. And of course, it's not. I can't thank the customers enough. In a typical year, guests contribute about 70% of the funds that come into the foundation, and then from Firehouse, itself, the founders, Robin Sorensen, Chris, myself, a lot of executives within the company always donated. Our supplier community was always
I know. I'm
terrific
sure they did a great
about
job.
contributing to it. So the funds come in through a variety of sources, but it's just very powerful. In the end, many of us, I know the Sorensens, I think I can safely speak for them on this front. When we look at what's been done in the business, it is the most meaningful thing, knowing that, if all of a sudden, God forbid, one day every Firehouse Subs restaurant fell off the face of the earth, the biggest impact would be if there was no foundation. That's what would be the travesty. Because think about the lives that wouldn't be saved.
Right.
Because then subsequent equipment wouldn't be available.
Right.
When it was needed.
I think the fact that the Sorensen brothers built the whole idea on also having the American dream, allowing those firefighters to be able to, they could still be a firefighter if they wanted to be, but they could also be potentially a restaurant owner. And I think that extended to any kind of person that's kind of working really hard and doesn't really ever feel like they can get ahead. And I think that I loved how they positioned those particularly early sales of the franchise, because they wanted people to be able to own their own business and really, invest themselves and care about it. And they continued that, as you said, with all of this charitable work, which I do think one of the things that you did such a great job on, and I talked to Liz the other day, Selodian, and she was talking about that was one of the most favorite things she ever worked on, was telling your communities the equipment that was purchased, the difference it made. I think a lot of times brands align with a charity. I can't think of any charity probably that we wouldn't support. All of us would say, oh, that's a great idea. But telling your guest and getting that awareness of what that actually did makes them just want to come back more, buy more sandwiches, contribute more dollars. And I think that that's one of the things Firehouse Subs did a really good job of bringing to life what their guests contributed to and what were the principles of that brand. And I think that's probably something that they could continue, maybe lean even a little bit more into as they go along, so they don't lose that traction and that connection to the local firehouses. My husband was a fire commissioner for 6 years, and he just loves his firehouse. And he goes, he's not anymore, but he makes a lot of visits. And the things that firemen do, it's amazing. All the commitments they make to their community, from, saving people, the first at almost every car wreck, the first to help an old person that's fallen in their homes. I mean, they just serve such a vast number of needs in a community, and people very rarely even think about that. They don't realize that fire truck gets there before almost anybody else.
And that's again a point of differentiation with Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. That cause, that charity, is that unlike most charities and great charities, at some point everybody, I dare say, is going to need a first responder.
I agree.
At some point. And so when you realize that those funds, the work of the foundation is going towards something that they can impact every single guest, whoever comes in, makes it pretty unique.
Right.
Compared to, again, write a long list of great charities and some that you will donate to that you might never impact you personally or even anybody in your family.
Well, I think that is the great thing, and to have that that unanimous support, which is, I would say, there's just, like you'd say, almost nobody could argue with that. It's such a valuable contribution to be made. Talk to me about two things, and then I won't keep you any longer, although I am going to have you back. I would love to understand what you think the secret to success is in the restaurant industry, what the one thing is you really have to do and have to be aware of. And then what are you planning to do? What are you thinking about now?
Sure. Well, I think I'm going to go back to a word I used before, which is empathy. I think if you're going to be successful in the restaurant business, you have to be empathetic. You have to be empathetic towards your team members. I mean, it's a hard business.
It is.
The generally the people that are working on your teams, through which you have to deliver everything you aspire to do, through the people that you employ, most of them are on their way to somewhere else. Right. How many times is nobody's there for good? It's not the nature of the business, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
And that's one of the important things as an employer, to understand that and realize it. And so if you adopt this empathetic perspective, and one that says, all right, when Bobby comes to work for me, I know the clock's ticking from day one. I just don't know when he or she's going to leave. But while they're here, I want to make the best of it for both of us. I want to be as rewarding for them as an employee as I can, learn as much as I can. They'll take those learnings, even in my restaurant, out to some other part of the world. And I'll benefit from it and our business will benefit from it. So make it as mutually beneficial as possible. There's a lot of business owners don't look at it that way, quite simply, and a lot of people in restaurants that don't look at it that way. But that's the real key to success, because again, for everything that you're going to do, it's got to be through those team members and your manager, and I mean, there's so many aspects to the industry, so many things that make it difficult. But I dare say, if you don't get that nailed down, your chances of long-term success are greatly handicapped.
I agree, because the people are your business. The people that come in the doors are your business, and the people working.
They are going to reflect your culture, the culture of your business. Culture. It's a bit of a worn cliche about the importance of culture, but it's true.
It is.
It's every operation has a culture, has a service culture, has an atmosphere to it when you go in. If you can't define it as the business owner, you got a real problem. Because you do have a culture, it's there. Maybe it's out of your choosing,
right?
And so you better be able to define what it is you want, what you're aspiring for, be able to communicate it, coach it. It's so important in a franchise system, because you're trying to multiply it across hundreds, thousands of restaurants. But you need, for the consistency of the experience, you need every franchisee to be able to see that in the same way. What does that perfect guest experience look like? So the challenge with leadership, especially with a larger brand, is how do you make sure that that's being communicated and reinforced down the line in your system? I relied on, over the years, I mentioned Technomic before, that and other measures. I want to quantify all that as much as I could, to be able to, increasingly important as you grow larger, find ways to be able to identify that and have red flags be raised when it's not right.
Right.
And because things in a restaurant can go south in a hurry.
Agree, and I always think if they're not prepared, also, because there are going to be things that are going to go wrong that just are going to happen, and I think a really good brand has backup solutions for how you take care of that guest, what you can say to that guest, how you can make it right at that time. And if you've got a strong manager or assistant manager, whoever's on the floor, if you've got that, their instincts are going to be to fix it.
Ideally, they remedy it. But in a large system, and I put a lot of emphasis on this during my time as CEO of Firehouse, is having that backup too.
Right.
We always gave and insisted that the franchisee took ownership and made every effort to do it. But still, even then, for the good of the brand, we have to try to rescue that guest.
Yes,
so
I
always
follow up.
So I had always kept my guest services team internal. I actually went through a couple phases on it, but when we got sufficient scale, made sure that it was internal team members that I could make sure understood the culture, that we're going to be representing the brand with our best foot forward. And there are some good outsourced companies to do that sort of thing, but I always felt having direct control of it was a better avenue for us.
I think that, actually Ruby Tuesday owns their own as well. And, that way you have people that are really trained for your brand. They know the commitments. They know what to say. If they don't, they have a person they can go to immediately to get the right answer. And even then, you're going to fail sometimes. But I think if your heart is in the right place and your leaders are fostering that, promoting that as a huge part of the success of that business, I think you will be successful. Zach McElroy did that too. He was great at that. Randy Kibler was great at that. In fact, I would say most of the great leaders that I've worked with, including you, are so good at really taking care of a situation, whether it's in the back of the house or it's with the guest or it's somebody that feels disappointed or whatever. There's so many issues.
And as CEO, I always believe you have to lead by example.
Right.
So, as my team always knew, look, if a guest has a complaint, again, it could be a restaurant in San Diego, and they want to talk to the CEO.
They're going to get
They're going to get to talk to the CEO.
I agree with that.
I can't tell you the number of times that, again, when I was making the call to them because somebody passed it on, and more often than not, they couldn't believe
It takes almost, it disarms them.
Totally.
They're so amazed. And I, as the CMO, I called also, and just the fact that somebody that was in a leadership role, cared, was going to fix it, was going to do everything, and was welcoming them back and tasking them, telling them how much they wanted them back and how appreciative they were that they took the time to write the letter or to pick up the phone or to, even, if the system is built right, that those complaints go up through the ladder so that everybody has them. And we all know what the mistakes are. And then you start looking and you can then have a kind of a roadmap to fixing them because I mean, still there's some crazy things that happen that you might not be able to predict.
But at the same time when I'm doing that, because yes, I'm trying to rescue that guest because in the end, there's a whole number of business reasons why I do it. But the even more powerful part of it is that I wanted my franchisee to see that.
Right.
That I was interjecting
because
if I'm holding them to a standard which says, look, you should be resolving every guest complaint, every issue that comes in, it's worth your time to do it. Look, if it's worth my time to do it for quote unquote your guest,
yes,
you should be doing it.
Taking
and
care of
when
it.
word gets out about that, then there's a level of genuineness to it, and it's a fair expectation then on my part and my team's part of every franchisee that they take care of their business and they embrace it as I suggested that they do. On you asked as far as what's up.
What are you thinking
for me now? So of course now I'm retired. If there is such a word,
I don't agree with
that.
But
after 50 years, as far as the day-to-day, retired from it. But I've served on a couple of boards, profit, nonprofit, served in a couple of advisory roles with some companies tangential to the restaurant business. So I suppose I'll keep doing that. On a completely outside the restaurant industry, as you know, I've written and had published a couple of books in the past, military history, World War II history. I've got a third book coming out already in 2024. It's a to try to make a long story short, it's a project that only came up about 5 months or so ago. It was the daughter of a veteran of the 4th Armored Division, which is the unit that I wrote the other 2 books about. And in those circles, I'm fairly well known as the most prominent expert on the 4th Armored Division.
Yeah.
And so this woman reached out to me because she had a memoir that her father who passed away in the 80s, had written probably when in the 1960s. But she was the last person in the family. Now she's 70, last surviving member of the family. And she really wanted to try to do something with it, get it published. So she knew my reputation. She reached out to me and said, what can I do? How do I get this published? And I said, well, tell you what, why don't you send it to me? I won't steal it or anything else. But send it to me. I'll give you an opinion about it, and I could maybe refer you to my publisher or try to give you some tips. And so she sends it to me, and I read it, and it's fantastic. It's like the most. I was stunned at how good this was, but it was a bit short. And it was about 48,000 words. And for a nonfiction where you need about 70, 75,000, at least my publisher, McFarland, that's typically what they would look for an academic work. So it needed something more to it. And a very important element, though, is when I got it, I was able to, through my own archive research and so on, I could authenticate it.
Oh, that's great.
Because it was so good. It was so good at first. You were like, all right, is
this a made-up story?
Right.
It's so great.
So I flushed that out easily. No, this is the real deal. I even had mentioned him in my first book.
Oh, wow.
Paul Porter. He was a sergeant. He won the Distinguished Service Cross, so he was known for that. So I knew he was real and didn't know the whole rest of his story. But I agreed to help her with it. I said, but what I'll do is I've got to add, not disrupting his narrative, but I've got to build out through an introduction and afterward, an epilogue, however we do it, I've got to build out about 20,000 more words to this and enhance it, which I then took on to do and then sold it. Got it picked up by my publisher, which made it easy since I've had 2 successful works with them.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's done already in my early retirement months. We've got that banged out. That'll be. I haven't got my publication date yet. Still waiting to get that or the final title. When you traditionally publish, the title always gets left up.
Changes.
Well, generally, for most authors, it gets left to the publisher. They've got to sell books.
Yeah. Right. They're looking for the most provocative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your artistic desire takes a back seat.
Yes, I can understand that.
When it comes to the title and the artwork for the cover.
Well, you'll have to come back and tell us a little bit about the book, and you'll have to come back and tell us what you're doing in the restaurant industry, because personally, I don't think you're out of it. I think you're really young. I think you're in great shape. I think your commitment to people and to systems and your strategic a way that you approach growing brands is so valuable. And what we're seeing today, and I think it's a failure in our industry, and I think it'll slow down, but we're just constantly putting people in for 2 years, 3 years, and then you never really build any kind of foundation. Mm-hmm. There's no discipline. There's every 3 years, they're completely changing what the brand stands for and what it's doing. And I think those things, there are some brands that probably need to be redefined, and they need a refresh. But a lot of them just need to lean back into how they were created, and certainly sophisticate their technology and their service provisions and their back of the house timing and all of those things. But they could be an incredible brand if they would just go back to who they were.
But that's what can be so valuable, of course, going back to a little bit the starting point in the conversation was the relationship between the agencies and the business.
Yes.
Because you need good candor,
right,
and frankness. If the product, in whether it's the level of service, the culture in the business, the food, if there's things that aren't good about it, is the old saying about putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, what if you're the marketing firm, and what do you expect of me? How can I do this successfully? So it takes that honesty, I think, a lot of times to be able to say, hey, look, you have a tough time leaning into this because it's not. It's not the brand. You're not delivering on it, and it's good money after bad.
And you talk about technomics. You believe in research. All agencies are believe in research. They are looking at it from a consumer's perspective, but they're also looking at all of the possibilities of where the brand could go and how it could, strengthen itself. And I think that's and I think they really have to understand the industry. That's a big part of it, because great creative is such a small piece of it. It's important, and it certainly it carries that image, but you've really got to understand why something could be great creative, because if it's not a part of that brand's DNA, of what really makes that brand special, like Firehouse Subs, which was, you made it special, the Sorensen brothers made it special, the franchisees have committed and continued to make it special, and I think it's itself ripe for a little strengthening in its communities, a little, I think most brands that get really big, they need kind of more, I don't know if you'd say boots on the street, because I don't think we have to do that anymore, but I think help in the markets often does a lot. I know for Zaxby's, one of the things we did is we built out a whole field team, that really could take care of a lot of the connections because your operators can only do so much. So I think you have to have an agency that either has all those aspects, or you buy them for one piece of it. But, you have been somebody I have admired for years. I have just enjoyed your personality. I think you're brilliant. I love who you are as a human being. And it was a super big pleasure for me to have you today, Don Fox. And I can't wait to see what you do next, because it's going to be something huge. And we're not going to use the word retiring ever, because I will tell you, my parents are still alive, and my father is a painter, and he still paints art, and he was an ad agency guy. If you don't keep doing, you are not who you are so uniquely wonderful. So I just can't wait to see what you do. I know it's going to be something wonderful, and I'm going to have you back when you do that.
I'll look forward to it.
I will look forward to it too, and I want to know the title of the book. All right. Thank you so much for being on Smart Takes, and we will have you back. Thank you, Don Fox.
Thank you.